Drops are the main shot that separate beginners from advanced players. So if you want to make that transition, you have to understand the secrets that me and Kennedy are about to take you through. An advanced player can make their drop in around 80% of the time. So if you're not there yet, maybe you're in the 60–50% range, you're in the right place. And for our newer players, to define a drop is essentially a dink from the back of the court that we hit into the kitchen so that we can move forward like I just did there. So the first secret, and by far the most important aspect to hitting successful drops, is how you're hitting the ball, specifically where you're aiming them. And there's a few different parts to that. So the first is how high the ball is when it's crossing the net. The next part is how hard you're hitting it, so the speed of the ball. The last part is where the ball is landing. So how high it's going over the net and where it's landing are going to be because of the ball's trajectory. So that's a super important part of hitting successful drops. But to start, you have to know how high should the ball be when it's passing the net. So what I like to tell people is that when you're hitting a drop, you should be going for about 1.5 feet over the net when the ball is passing the net. So it might actually be higher before that, but when the ball is crossing the plane of the net, I believe it should be about 1.5 feet over. And when you hit it here, it's okay if the ball is a little lower. This is actually good for the ball to be low, but you don't want to aim low, because if you aim 6 inches over the net, you might just miss in the net if you mess up, right? Because this is a very challenging shot to be really accurate with. So if I'm hitting it right here, maybe every third drop's just gonna go in the net. So this is where I go to give myself the highest possible margin for error. What you don't wanna do is go 2, 3, 4 feet over the net, because up here, this is the caution zone. This is where your opponent's probably gonna maybe smash the ball. They could probably get it out of the air and smash it. And if it bounces, they might actually be able to hit it hard off the bounce. So let me show you a few examples of what that looks like. So if I hit the ball too high, even if it bounces in front of Kennedy, she can be aggressive. So that doesn't really do much for me. It's not all about making it land in front of her. What I'm trying to do is I want to make Kennedy hit the ball where she's really leaning over and can barely reach it like that, or she has to pivot back and gets into a little bit of an uncomfortable situation like that. So it's actually better for me to let her take the ball out of the air in some cases than to make it bounce in front of her, because she can still be aggressive off the bounce. So in terms of where the ball is landing, to make that happen, you want to be going for the back portion of the kitchen. So you're connecting about 1.5 feet over the net with making the ball land towards the back of the kitchen. That's where Kennedy's going to be leaning over, right? And she might not be able to reach that ball, so that's where she'll have to pivot backwards. So this is really the zone that you're going for. And when you do this, you also give yourself some margin for error, because if I'm going for a drop that's landing right here, there's a very, very thin margin to where I can hit that shot to make that happen. So when you go a little bit farther, you give yourself more consistency. So when you put those two targets together, from the back of the court, it looks something like this. So when I'm aiming there, I can pretty consistently make my drops in, and I have that slight little margin for error. So there I hit it a little bit too low, but I still make my drop in because I'm giving myself that extra 1.5 feet of buffer. So to show you a few more, this is what a consistent drop looks like. And in terms of my ball speed, I'm hitting the ball as slow as I possibly can along that trajectory. If I go faster, see, Kennedy can take it out of the air and hit down on the ball. So I'm really going for a slow trajectory that's arcing over the net. And when I do that in combination with where I'm aiming the ball, that's how I get the ball to drop. So by hitting the drop hard, it's not gonna actually do you very well. It's gonna make it a lot easier for your opponents to attack. And as a bonus tip, the one time your drop target will change is if you're playing someone really tall. They probably can reach a lot farther into the kitchen. So that's the one time you might wanna actually bring your target in a little bit. This is only for really tall people. If you're playing someone like me or Kennedy where we didn't get that tall genetics, you don't need to worry about that. But against really tall people, a lot of the time they can reach really far. So you need to bring your target closer to the net. So the next secret you need to keep in mind to maximize your drop consistency is something I call the buffer technique. And all this is if Kennedy's hitting really hard at me and I'm at the back, in order to maximize my consistency, I'm probably gonna need to be hitting my drops a little bit higher. So if she's hitting hard, instead of aiming 1.5 feet over the net, I'll probably increase to 2.5 feet over the net. I'm gonna keep my landing zone the same because I don't want her to be smashing it out of the air, but I'm gonna increase my height over the net because that gives me a little bit more margin for error. So you can do this on harder drops There's also some other times you can do it.
And you guys, you can use this mindset when you guys are starting off your games, and if you're missing a little bit too much, you could start off by aiming a little bit higher and then bring your margins down as you play.
Exactly, so if you're warming up, you can just aim a little bit higher, because in the beginning of a day, or if you're just having an off day, you can just aim a little higher, and I'd rather have you guys make your drop than just miss them, right? So in the beginning of a day, you can also increase the height over the net so that you're maximizing your consistency. And if your opponents are just destroying those shots and smashing them all, then okay, bring it down a little bit. But you want to prioritize consistency. So consistency first. Once you're making them, then you can adjust the height and your target for the maximum best result. The next thing you need to consider to get the most possible consistency is where you're hitting your drops in terms of cross court or down the line. So I can go down the line, and I can also go cross court. Kennedy, where are your favorite targets?
My favorite's probably going cross court or down the middle.
Yeah, so a lot of players, probably most players, prefer going cross court or down the middle when they drop. And the reason for that is if you draw an angled line versus a straight line in the kitchen, it's longer. So you have more space to work with when you go cross court or down the middle. Because when you go down the middle, you still have the angle that you're creating when you go cross court too. So when I'm dropping cross court, I have to hit my ball a little bit farther to get there. But when I do this, my consistency is probably better because I have more space to work with. Down the middle, though, is my personal favorite target because I limit the chances that I miss out to the sides when I do that too. So I personally like to go down the middle towards the player on the right's backhand. This is my #1 drop that I go for because players generally aren't as good at being aggressive on their backhand, and you get the benefit of going down the middle. So that's probably the #1 spot you can go for. You can also do this from the other side too. So I'm not going to be going as cross court. I'm going right towards the player in front of me's backhand in the middle of the court. So that's a great spot to target. But you can also just go cross court. So if I'm over here, I can go for more of an angle. She's getting a forehand here, but still kind of a tough shot to be aggressive on. So what I would like to do though, to maximize your consistency, you don't want to have a different target every single time that you're hitting a drop. You should probably pick 1 or 2 that you go for almost every time, and you should keep going towards these until you get to that 80% consistency. Because if you're changing down the line, cross court, down the middle, your consistency is going to drop because you're not getting used to hitting the ball a certain way. So #1 should be middle. That should be your #1 target if you don't have the consistency yet. And then once you're starting to get consistency there, you can start going cross court too. And once you get both those consistent, maybe you can start being a little more random with it. And if you're liking this video so far, make sure to like and subscribe.
Right now, we're trying to become the first pickleball channel to have 200,000 subscribers.
So if you want to help the sport grow and reach even more people, like this video and hit the subscribe button as well. So the next secret that you guys need to know has to do with the tension that you're holding the paddle and how long your stroke is.
A lot of times when I'm coaching, I see players try to make their drop too perfect. They have a really jerky motion here. So make sure you're making contact out in front and you're continuing the motion through towards your target.
So what's important to note is that you don't get control from being really tight. So it might feel like that gives you control since you have, a tighter grip on your paddle, but you get control on your drops from being loose. So if I'm going like this and I'm really being jerky and having a super, super short motion, it's sort of like a sawed-off shotgun where the ball can go in a variety of different directions. What I want to do is be loose and draw a line with my paddle towards my target. Because when I do that, that's how I stay accurate. So you don't stay accurate by being tight. You stay accurate by being loose and drawing a line with your paddle towards your target. So you want to have a compact motion. You don't want to be swinging super big, but you need to be long enough to where you get that accuracy from drawing a line towards your target. So if you look at Kennedy's technique, she's going right towards her target with her paddle. She's super loose, and that's how she's able to make her drops in pretty much every time. So if she was super tight, which you'll see right here, she can make it, but it's really hard for her to stay accurate. So think about being loose and extending your paddle towards your target.
And another thing I tend to see is people will use too much wrist when they hit the shot, and their paddle face will be facing towards the sky when they finish their shot. And what this does, again, it kind of messes with your accuracy, and sometimes you're gonna hit too high.
What you wanna do is minimize the variables when you're hitting the shot. So your shoulder should be the primary source of power with your body. You don't wanna be using your wrist on a drop as a source of power. So when Kennedy hits it, if she hits it with her wrist, one, she might pop the ball up because she's, facing her racket up towards the sky, but she also might just get too much power and give me a shot that I can smash, right? So what you want to think about with your wrist is that after you hit your drop, your wrist should still be laid back and it should be kind of facing your target. So if you see Kenadi do that on her forehand, it's going to be facing up a little bit because of the way that your stroke works, but you don't want your wrist to be perfectly parallel with the sky. It should still be facing towards your opponent or where you're hitting the ball a little bit. And real quick, guys, I just wanted to tell you about our new product, the Ninja Ball. So listen to this. Me and Kenadi are dinking and you can barely hear it. You pretty much can't hear it all. It's a silent pickleball. And with this, what you can do is practice at home. You can practice all your shots because it bounces pretty much the same as a normal pickleball. You can practice all your shots at home, on a wall, or with a friend without making a ton of noise. So I'm sure you know that a normal pickleball, if you hit it, especially inside, super loud, super echoey. So with this, you can practice any shot without the noise. So when I started playing, I was really doing a lot of wall drills and my dad would get so mad at me. It also kind of damaged the wall a little bit. This is foam, so it's not going to damage the wall at all. So if you're the kind of person that can't stop thinking about pickleball and you want to practice at home, definitely should go check out the Ninja Ball. And if you have a Dink Master, this is one of the most compatible things you could do with it because it lets you be able to use the Dink Master inside without making any noise. It just makes it a lot more versatile.
The next most important thing about the drop is making sure you're making contact out in front of you when you're playing. You also, when you're doing this, want to rock through the shot as you hit it. A lot of times I'll see players hitting the ball to the side of them or sometimes even behind them like this. You want to make sure that you get your feet behind the ball so that way as you hit, you're hitting out in front and you could rock or take that step through that shot.
So the way that you do that is with your footwork. So when you see the drop coming to you, you should be moving around like this so that you have the opportunity to hit the ball out in front and can move forward. If you're lazy with your feet and you're just standing there, by the time the ball gets to you, you're probably going to be reaching, it's going to be too close to you or behind you, right? So when Kenadi's hitting her drops, she's strafing around with her feet so that she can always be moving forward through it. So regardless of where I hit it, she's very active with her feet for that reason. And what's important to remember is that your body is more stable than your arm. So that's why we want you to rock forward, because if you're only using your arm for power, there's a lot more that can go wrong. If you're using your body, you don't have to swing as hard with your arms. So it actually increases your accuracy a lot to be getting your weight through the ball. And the same goes for the backhand too. You want to be moving your feet so that you can rock forward through the ball. So to show you some examples, watch Kenadi's feet. Look how she's always setting herself up to be in the right position. She's moves really quickly to the ball so that she can always move forward through it. And she's making contact with it in the same spot every time. Even if I go hard, she's there. She'll increase her margin over the net like we talked about earlier. That's why she can make in pretty much all of her drops, right? Because she's in the right position. Where your consistency will really drop is if you're reaching, your ball's too close to you. If you're hitting your drop in a different spot every single time, you're probably gonna miss a lot of them. So you need to make sure that you're trying to hit it the same way every single time with your footwork and with your contact point, so where you're contacting the ball. And once you have your footwork and your technique down, the last thing that you need to focus on is where you're hitting the ball on the paddle. Specifically, to hit a consistent drop, you need to be hitting the center of the paddle or the sweet spot every time, because if you miss the sweet spot like Kenadi's about to, you miss-hit the ball and you'll probably hit it in the net, because when you miss the sweet spot, you lose power. So when I miss off to the side, my paddle twists a little bit and that essentially makes me hit it a lot slower and the ball goes in the net. So when you're hitting these shots, you need to be hyper-focused on hitting the center of your paddle every single time. And when you do that, that's where you're gonna get the consistent result.
And that's why it's so important to have a good paddle that has a big sweet spot, because if it has a good sweet spot, you're not gonna have to focus so hard on getting the center on each shot. And that's why we made the Sweet Spot Pro. It has a really big sweet spot, which is gonna help with these drops, with that accuracy, getting that ball where you want it to be. So if you're in the market for a new paddle, head to our site and use the code DROP for 20 bucks off.
And the last thing you wanna think about to have the most possible consistency on your drops is when you're hitting the ball, ideally it's falling, not rising. So if you watch when I'm hitting my drops, I move back a little bit to catch the ball as it's on the way down. Let me show you how that looks again. So I want the ball to be on the way down as I'm hitting it. And the reason I want that is because it just makes me more accurate, because I'm not changing the path of the ball. I'm just drawing a line that goes exactly in the opposite direction of where the ball's coming. So if I'm hitting the ball while it's rising, I'm sort of having to shift the ball's direction. So a cool exercise I like to think about with my students is that they're holding a cone and they need to catch the ball, they need to wait for the ball to fall, right? So that's where you want to make contact with it. Imagine you're holding something or a cone or whatever to catch the ball. You can't really catch it as it's coming up. It becomes a lot harder to catch it like that. So what you'd want to do is wait for the ball to start falling. So I have my cone, and I catch it right when it's on the way down. So I'm not catching it like at the bottom where it's about to bounce twice. I'm catching it right when it starts to fall a little bit. So that's a cool analogy, a cool way to think about it to make sure you're getting the ball as it's falling. And guys, as a reminder, if you want to support our channel, make sure to go check out our products. If you want to keep learning though, in this next video, I go over exactly how to hit your serve harder so that your third shot becomes even easier.
This video is sponsored by playpickleball.com, where you can get the latest info on court availability, leagues, and coaches in your area. Make sure to check it out sometime.